A very good night to you and a big warm welcome to this, the third night of our diocesan mission. People are linking in from every parish in the diocese and from further afield. So we have thousands of you participating with us over the last 3 days. So you're very welcome. And tonight, whether you're joining us on Facebook Live or on Zoom, we're delighted to have you. We're building community. So thank you very much for joining us, Céad Míle Fáilte. Many of you will have participated in today's mission schedule. So again, welcome back this evening and we're delighted to have you with us. The format of tonight is we have our special guest. They make an input of about 20 minutes. Then we have an intermission piece of music while your questions are gathered by Francis Rowland. So that means that we need your questions. So please submit a question to us if you feel one coming on you at any stage during the night. If you look to the bottom of your screen there, there's a Q&A icon and you just tap on that and write in your question. We would absolutely love your participation. It's very, very welcome and don't be shy. So tonight, our special guest is Seán McDonagh. Seán is a Columban missionary priest and he's an eco-theologian. Care of the earth is the central organizing focus of his work, which has spanned over 50 years now at this stage. Seán is an outspoken, challenging critic of the degradation of the environment. And he, like all of us, he links this to global poverty and the increased suffering of the poor. So you can see why it is really a mission for him and a life's work. His focus was first drawn to the relationship between faith, justice, and ecology when he began working in the Philippines in the 70s. And as you know, he has continued this work for a very long time now. He chaired Greenpeace in Ireland in the 90s. Many of you will remember that and the importance of it. And sometimes we forget about these things that we were part of all down through the years. The whole focus on care of the earth has been there for a while. We just need to keep upping the emphasis. He's also been instrumental in offering a master's degree in ecology and faith at the Columban Centre in Dalgan Park in County Meath, my county of origin, Upmeath. Seán has published 14 books, and with Sylvia Thompson's help, I just have pulled up a few of them for you. Greening the Christian Millennium, if you can see that. There are quite a few here. Why are we dead to the cry of the earth? Dying for water. The Death of Life. What a man. This is amazing. I would be so proud if I had written one of these or edited them or whatever. Climate Change, the challenge to all of us. We're getting closer to the present now. 2016, he wrote the commentary on Laudato Si. Hugely, hugely significant book, letter to all of us from the Pope, as you know, and we've been telling you about it consistently in Kerry for the last 8 years, I'd say. And then Laudato Si, an Irish response, edited by Seán again. I hope you can see these because it's pretty impressive. And then 2021, Robots, Ethics and the Future of Jobs. Now, that's just a quick run through. That's not all his books, 14 books. This is the man that we have here talking to you tonight. It's just amazing. So he's talking tonight on his theme, a very obvious theme, sowing the seeds of hope. And he has some of his books there behind him. I want to say a very, very warm welcome to you, Seán McDonagh. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Mary, and I'm delighted to be speaking to the people of Kerry and other people who are listening to this from various parts of Ireland, and I think from various places around the world. My first introduction to Kerry was as a teenager going back to Muriach, learning the Gaeilge. And for 3 years, I went back there every year. Got a great love for the Gaeilge, but also a great love for Irish music. And the Céilí Mór was a central feature of the Gaeltacht at that time. I became aware, of course, of Kerry as an important team winning All-Ireland in football. I thought 2 years ago when Tipperary, because I'm a Tipperary man, when we won the Munster Championship, for the first time in 86 years, I thought we were going to go on to become a football group as well as a hurling group, but it hasn't happened. And then 3 weeks ago, the Kerry hurlers, they beat Tipperary. So maybe Kerry is going to go on and become a great hurling county as well as football county. So, as I say, I'm from Tipperary, but I'm here in County Meath. And on my way back to today, I came up the N52. And on my way, I thought a lot of what had happened, the murder of Aisling Murray last Wednesday, and the impact that has had on her family. My condolence to them, her boyfriend, her extraordinary friends. Because what you said in your introduction, building community, that's seemingly what she did with her life as a teacher, as someone who played Irish music, and as someone who was a camogie player in the GAA. And that's the kind of thing we have to do. Bring our Christian faith to living the fullness of life around us. And that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. And of course, thinking of Aisling, I thought about violence against people, but particularly against women, which is something we're going to have to root out of our society into the future. So tonight we're going to talk about a new spirituality. It's new because we are learning more and more about what we're doing to planet Earth. But it's also new because of that encyclical that Pope Francis published in 2015, Laudato Si, on care for our common home. And even if we're not Christian, we realize that living in this planet, we're going to have to change our ways. We heard that, for example, last November from Glasgow, COP26, talking about climate change. We're going to have to get away from fossil fuel. We're going to get other forms of energy so we can live sustainably here on our planet. The same is true. We're going to hear, for example, in April and in May of this year, what we're doing to biodiversity. It's called COP15, which will take place in China, in Kunming in China. And again, I will talk about what we're doing to the rest of our planet, which is we're destroying huge areas of it, which will have an effect on all creatures, including humans, into the future. I suppose a background to myself would help to get the thing moving. I came here to Dalgan in the 1960s, and I studied here. There was a concern about working for justice, and particularly working for the poor, particularly because we were going to countries like the Philippines, etc., where many people were poor, and liberation theology was telling us that as Christians we should work for them. But there was very little about what's happening to our planet. For example, even though Rachel Carson, a marine biologist in the United States, had written a book in 1962, Silent Spring, saying what we are doing to the natural world by particularly the use of pesticides, destroying the insect population. But there was nothing on what we're doing to the natural world in Vatican II. Now, Vatican II was an extraordinary event for the Catholic Church, probably the second most important event in the second millennium, and certainly brought the church into the modern world. But that area, we weren't focused on it. I often wonder, for example, if there'd been equal number of women bishops at Vatican II as male, would they have actually taken this more seriously than the males did? And then even after Vatican II, with the social encyclicals, which again were very good, were telling us what we might do, but they were not telling us what we're doing to the natural world. We had no critique of, for example, industrialization and what it was doing to the biosphere. We were very, in that area, we had much to learn. And then, of course, in 2015, the Pope brought out this extraordinary document on Laudato Si, care for our common home. And right at the beginning, he does something extraordinary. He uses a speech by the Archbishop of Constantinople, Bartholomew, of the Greek Orthodox Church, and it is extraordinary. He says, I'll read for you. For humans to destroy the biological diversity of God's creation, for humans to degrade the integrity of the earth by causing change in its climate, by stripping the earth of its natural forests or destroying its wetlands, for humans to contaminate the earth's water, its land, its air, and its life. Does he say, now, these are not good things to do, please don't do it, shouldn't be doing this in the future? No, what he says is extraordinary. He says, these are sins. Now, this is extraordinary new teaching. I have been a priest for 52 years. I've heard confessions in Ireland, in England, in Scotland, in the Philippines, in Australia, in the United States. I've never heard anyone who came in and said, I have sinned against creation. So here's something that is now taking in our hearts. Our consciousness is growing constantly about this. What are we doing to the natural world? And it's not that it's not good. These are sins, and very serious sins. And this is going to become more and more prevalent in the way we live our Christian tradition into the future. But that's not just all. Unfortunately, in our prayer life was very often very negative towards the natural world. Now, all you in Kerry know that Kerry is a very beautiful place. You couldn't talk about Kerry without talking about Killarney and all that. But you don't think they're awful places. And yet, in the Mass, after the Council of Trent, the post-communion prayer, after we received Jesus, and we celebrated giving thanks to God for the wonder of creation and for the life and death of Jesus, this is what we prayed. O Lord, teach us to despise the things of earth and to love the things of heaven. Now, I could read it for you in Latin, but it's actually even worse. So this is this wonderful world. We have no idea how many species. There could be 10 million species. Wonderful world. And that's the way we talk about it. And unfortunately, it wasn't just there. The second most popular prayer in the second millennium was the Rosary. And in the Salve Regina, this is what we said: mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Now, is Kerry a valley of tears? My memories of being in Kerry and out in Maria, looking out in the ocean, is extraordinary and awesome. And it's not a valley of tears. So we are being asked to actually change our way of praying. It is extraordinary. And when I talk about Pope Francis's letter, Laudato Si, care for our common home, I'm going to give an example of the way he is praying now, so that we will also be moving in this direction with our prayer. He says, all-powerful God, you are present in the universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace us with tenderness. Pour out upon us all of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with your peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of the earth. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty and not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only to gain at the expense of the earth and the poor. Teach us to discover the worth of everything with awe and contemplation, and to recognize that we're profoundly united with every creature. Now, that's an extraordinary change, where we had very little engagement with the natural world, and now we see it's absolutely essential for the way we will live into the future. And it's there certainly in Laudato Si. So we have the new ethics and new spirituality and prayer life. And so, of course, that calls for action. That is what people need to do. Begin to live their Christian life, understanding these things and incorporating them into their lives. Now, myself, over my years as a priest, I went to the Philippines in 1969. It was a great time to be a missionary. We were doing all kinds of things after Vatican II, social justice, helping to make the gospel more meaningful to people in their culture and all that. But there was very little on what we were doing to the natural world. Now, I enjoyed my first parish, it was wonderful. And then I did a bit of study on anthropology and linguistics. And then I taught in the university, where in a Muslim area of Mindanao, and we got involved in Christian-Muslim dialogue, all very important. And then unfortunately, in 1978, I went to live among the Tiboli. These are tribal peoples who lived in the mountains, had very little contact with foreigners before that, and they had an extraordinary understanding of the natural world. But unfortunately, it was being destroyed. We think here in Ireland, we look at our trees. There's about 25 trees which are indigenous to Ireland, and we should have many more of them around. But in the Philippines, the Terracar forests, even in an acre of land, you might find 100 or 110 different species. So this is extraordinary. And I was amazed at this and began to understand that we need to take this now into our Christian faith, and began actually to write about it. And the first book I wrote was To Care for the Earth, A Call to a New Theology. And I remember sending it home to my sister, and she sent it around to about 10 publishers here in Ireland. And no one was interested in it. What's this about concern for the earth? No one. Who's talking about that? And I remember I came home the following year in 1985, and I gave a talk in Trinity College about this. And my professor, he had been my professor in Dalgan. He was now teaching in Trinity, Seán McDonagh. He said, "Oh, you missionaries are great, but you don't write." And I said, "Sorry, I have a book here." And McDonough, who many of the older priests would know, was there at that meeting. And he said, "I'll take the book and give it to my publisher in London," which is actually what happened. So that was the beginning of my journey engaging in this area. And it is, as I say, a call to a new theology, and it is now central to our understanding of our Christian faith as it is presented in Laudato Si, caring for our common home. So many of these issues are now present actually in the Diocese of Kerry. Concern for biodiversity, for example. Concern for Laudato Si, for example. I'm told that Jane Mellett, the Laudato Si officer from Tropra, is doing a presentation there on Laudato Si over 6 weeks. And many different initiatives will be taken during that time. And also initiatives that are not just theoretical, but they're also practical. For example, initiatives to plant trees, to set up about areas for biodiversity around churches, for example, around gardens, to set up things for birds and for bats. So these issues are becoming very practical in our lives, because if we accept this new way of doing things, we also have to accept that this will bring together our Christian faith and the way we must live at the moment. Just almost 10 days ago, one of the brightest biologists in the United States, E.O. Wilson, and he said something about 20 years ago, that future generations will forgive human beings for a lot of the damage of the 20th century and the 19th century, particularly World War I and World War II. But what they will not forgive us is destroying the natural world. And that's what we need to understand. And some of these now, this will go up on your website after this talk. But the reality is, in terms of destroying God's creation, we're now living in the 6th largest extinction since life began. Life began about 3.8 billion years ago. The last extinction was 65 million years ago, when a rock hit the earth about 20 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide and did enormous damage. But now we are doing this kind of damage, and we're doing it particularly to insects, mainly because of the way we do agriculture and the use of pesticides. For example, since 1980, pesticide numbers in Europe, including in Ireland, have dropped by 40%. Now that's extraordinary, because 1/3 of our food actually comes from pollination. So in a sense, concern for biodiversity is not just concern for other creatures, but it's concern for ourselves as well. And that's the thing we need to take much more seriously. But also, every species has intrinsic value. That's very central in Laudato Si. Before that, we weren't sure we were going to say whether they were useful for us, but no. The Pope is saying now they have intrinsic value, and we must understand that and take seriously that. And for example, the National Biodiversity Centre has brought out a booklet, for faith communities, how to help pollinators in the future. And I'm sure that is every parish is going to be interested in extending this in their local area. As I said, COP15 is taking place in April, the last week of April, and the first week in May this year in Kunming in China. Now, it'd be interesting to see, will it get the same level of approach as COP16 did in Glasgow? And I hope it will, because I think that is very important. For example, climate change is something we have to do a lot about. Within 10 years, we're going to have to drop our use of fossil fuel by something like 30%. Now, how are we going to do that? Could parishes come together, make things available for people so they could work together? I'm sure you're thinking about a lot of those things in Kerry yourself. The impact of climate change on extreme weather and on the oceans. At the moment, for example, we're told that in South America, there's a crack in bringing, if it melted, the sea could rise by 2 meters and do all kinds of damage to a lot of the towns and villages and cities that are built in the sea. So these challenges are there for us into the future. Homeowners will have challenges about retrofitting their houses. That we're not again dependent on fossil fuel. We're going to be dependent on electricity and heat pumps and all of that. Again, could we as parishes begin to see this as part of our Christian life? Making these changes has been central to the future. Also about water. How are we looking after water? This is a country that gets plenty of water, but do we look after it in the proper way? And of course, all of us are aware, when I was growing up, there were no plastic bottles with water. And now, when you look around the place, there is so much plastic. And even the pandemic has led to an enormous amount of plastic, PPE, gloves, all over the place, and masks. So we're going to have to believe in a challenging way to say, we just can't live for ourselves and pretend other species don't matter. So to go back to my central point is we have to live the gospel in this new way. And these new ways have been opened to us by Pope Francis in Laudato Si, and we must take them on board and make them part of our local church. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seán McDonagh. Thank you very much for that inspiring, challenging talk. It is certainly time for us to make a more positive mark on the environment, to write our book on the environment in such a positive way as you're suggesting. Now, while Francis gathers your questions together, we'll listen to a song, Colours of the Wind, sung by Drumtariff Church cantor and primary school teacher, Anne-Marie O'Riordan.
You think you own what's everlasting, stand on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim, but I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you learn things you never knew, you never knew. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or ask the grinning bobcat why he grins? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Come round the hidden pine trails of the forest. Come taste the sun-sweet berries of the earth. Come rolling in the riches all around you, and for once never wonder what they're worth. The rainstorm and the river are my brothers. The heron and the otter are my friends, and we are all connected to each other in a circle, in a hoop that never ends. How high does a sycamore grow? If you cut it down, then you'll never know. And you'll never hear the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or whether we are white or copper skinned. You need to sing with all the voices of the mountain. Learn to paint with all the colors of the wind. You can own the earth and still all you own is earth, until you can paint with all the colors of the wind.
Welcome back to our question time. And that was absolutely beautiful. And we're lucky to have cantors like Anne-Marie O'Riordan all over the diocese. So thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Francis Rowland, thank you for joining us. Have you questions for Seán? And Seán is just joining us again now with a few questions. So thank you, Francis.
Oh, have I questions, Mary? The Q&A button has been hot and fast with lots of questions for you, Seán. So I might start with a very practical one. I suppose people are asking, Seán, how do we do real concrete things in our own lives? And one has come in here around weed killer and whether it should be banned as it's carcinogenic. So people are asking a few little really practical points that you might give us about everyday things we can do starting from today, please.
Yes, in many situations, we're going to have to think differently about the way we relate to the natural world, and the way we use pesticides is just appalling, and we cannot continue to do that. But the most important thing I hope I said is to bring together our understanding of our faith and the things we can do. To understand it in a global context, but the reality is it will only mean something if it happens locally. And that's the important thing. So that things can happen, and that the church may help to foster this and to make the situation available for people to bring about these changes in their local parishes, wherever they are. And that's seen as part of the way we live our faith.
And I think people heard very strongly that point. And I suppose the question was asked here, like, how come we were so unaware of the sinfulness of our actions, or our neglect of our intimate connection with the earth for so long?
Well, we until the 18th century, we didn't have industrialization. I suppose it happened in the 19th century, and we thought we were gaining an understanding of the natural world and using it for our own benefit, which we were. But we were forgetting what we were actually doing to it. And it's not just Christians or Catholics. Most of the Christian community weren't doing that either. And I remember when Rachel Carson published her book, Sign of Spring, a lot of the companies that she was challenging actually made all kinds of accusations against her personally. So that was an extraordinary reality. And it was one, in my estimation, it's the book that started the ecological movement in the latter part of the 20th century. So at least with Pope Francis, we have this new understanding. But what we have to do is bring it into our Christian faith and the way we live. I would love to see, for example, a beautiful diocese like Kerry, that there were 6 or 7 Eucharistic prayers that would take account of the beauty of Kerry and what we need to do with it. And that those would be said every Sunday morning, not the 4 prayers that we have at the moment, which actually almost says nothing about the natural world. So those are the kind of things I'd like to see happening.
So it's in our language, you're looking for a greater connection with our own locality, our own, the world in which we live, that the prayers reflect that beauty and the demands and the needs of that place. So you spoke about the Hail Holy Queen there, and a lot of reaction to that, Seán. I suppose people kind of feeling, does the Valley of Tears not reflect more than nature? Is it not those tribulations, difficulties, challenges that are part of living?
And it is, and it's awful challenges too. I mean, in actual fact, it comes from almost the time of the Black Death. The Black Death wiped out almost half the population of Europe in the 14th century. And unfortunately, at least with our pandemic, we know what's happening, and we've got pandemics, or we've got vaccinations and that, but they didn't know what was happening. But that's true, and I can understand that. That's what happened. But the reality is now we know, particularly in the last 40 years, the wonder and beauty of creation, the natural world, the plant world, the world of insects. And that we're not bringing this into our Christian faith to thank God. Like when you talk about Kerry, yeah, but it's God gave us Kerry, you know. Kerry is God's place, as Tipperary is. And that's the place where we need to live out our Christian faith. Not talking about doing it in Antarctica or the Arctic, doing it locally in our place. And that's the way of the future.
And in terms of that, I suppose people are asking here, if you were to suggest something for a community in Kerry, one way that they might at least begin to kind of embrace their own sense of the earth and their own way of, I suppose, caring for the earth. Have you a thought?
Well, at 2 levels, I have a thought we'd take it seriously in our prayer life. But I'd also have a thought, what kind of things need to be done here? What, like, people would like to do, make grow things, for example? Are we going to help them to be able to do that? Can we make things available in our parish that might be useful, where people can do these kind of things? And to see it as part of a parish-based initiative. For example, retrofitting houses. If you do them one by one, it's not great. But the reality is, if you did them as a parish-based thing, then again we link our Christian faith with what we're trying to do, and we know that this is what we need to do. And of course, one of the things we need to really work on, and we need to put pressure on the multinational corporations. I mean, every time I go shopping, I get really upset about the level of plastic. Now, I know what it's about. I know why it's there, but it shouldn't be there. And I don't think it should. And we're going to have to start moving on that, put pressure on politicians, but put pressure on these multinationals that they stop doing this into the future.
So I hear you asking us to move from an individual action to us as a group and us as a faith community. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But also realize this new faith community, we have a new ethics, which again, we didn't have.
Yeah.
We have a new spirituality. We have new sacraments. I'd like to see all the sacraments change dramatically to incorporate all this. I mean, to be fair, to be awfully fair, we got an appalling translation in Latin as well of the four canons in 2010. And I was very surprised that priests or bishops would even think of using it. And when we say, the Lord be with you and with your spirit, your spirit means absolutely nothing. Like, why have we accepted this nonsense to be put upon us? We have a right to have decent prayers like Pope Francis has given us in Laudato Si. And those we should challenge it. If we challenge the multinational, we should challenge church authorities to give us decent Eucharistic prayers, that people will not be bored at the Eucharist and actually will enjoy it.
Thank you. That's a very fine reflection of some of what's coming in here. And there's a huge appreciation for what you're drawing our attention to this evening, Seán. People are very conscious of the need to do more than the small steps. People are asking, how do we sort of band together? How do we do this as a collective? And people have also spoken here about the whole language of prayer. So thank you very much for that. And just as a final, a focal square, just to say a huge appreciation for the commitment and integrity shown by the Columbians in terms of their commitment to the poor. And a question here as to why that has always been part of your ethic.
Well, it's been part of our founders particularly. And then we went to countries where we, like the Philippines, we began to understand the plight of our people. And one of the big things that people are asking me, what can I do? Again, it's important to do it locally. I mean, that's what I did in the Taboli world. I didn't know what to do. And I got people in to help us, but the people had important things to say. And I think that is also true in Kerry. They have hugely important things to say, but for us to make the connections with what's happening to water, how we're going to get rid of plastic, what is central to our living out of this new Christian faith, of this new articulation of the Christian faith, and it will bring us joy and happiness and make life better for all of us.
Thank you. Just one final word, Mary, before you take over again. I suppose just the frustration that people feel at times, and you mentioned plastics there an awful lot, and people feel a huge frustration, Seán, that you try to do something, and we're doing something like closing the peat electricity plants here in Ireland, and then in China they're opening them up. So there's that feeling of, as something good is happening on one side of the world, it's being undone on the other side. Do you want to make a final comment to that, please?
Well, you say, like, the Columbians were very focused on people living in poverty. And the reality is, if you talk about climate change has been caused by 10% of the world's population, including us Irish here. So, like, we're very, very much aware that the 80 million people in the Philippines, they're not as responsible as we Irish are. So we need to keep that in mind, because very often we can forget that. And that's in a sense what the Columbians have taken on board, justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. Now, it's not just the Columbians, the World Council of Churches, one of the great groups of Christians brought this out 40 years ago. So, but we must incorporate this now and act on it and not just talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are many, many questions that could keep you here all night, but we might close with that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. And thank you, Seán. I love your spirit. I love your challenge. So thanks very much for that. Now, something else that I loved, a few weeks ago on Horizons, I was talking to a number of students on the 9 o'clock program on Radio Kerry Horizons. I have to get that in. A number of students from 6th class presentation primary school in Tralee. I was really impressed. And one area they spoke on was the environment. And when our theme tonight was Sowing Seeds of Hope, I want you to have a listen to Siobhan and Sarah from the Presentation Primary School in Tralee now to hear what they have to say.
My name is Siobhan. And my name is Sarah. Well, we're concerned about our future and how it could affect our future. Rising temperatures, loads of things that affect it. The litter on the streets, air pollution. There's loads of things that could affect us in our future.
I think one of the main things is, you know, planet Earth is meant to be green, full of trees, full of nature, full of life, and by littering and causing pollution, we're just going to kill all of that and we'll just go into a big slump. There'll be no green grass, no breathing trees. It'll just be depressing, really.
At home, how has it impacted on your lives?
Really, at home, all you can do is just make sure that you put everything in the right bin, make sure that when you're shopping, do I really need this thing with tons of plastic on it, or is there an option with less plastic? Just little things like that. They hardly even affect your daily life. They just make things a bit easier for the planet.
And Siobhan, what do you think? Do you think we're a bit hypocritical and we do all the talk but we don't do the walk?
Well, some people might be like that, but like Sarah said, for like when you're going shopping, you could try maybe to find more organic stuff so there isn't chemicals going into the ground which could harm animals or just the planet itself, really.
And what I want to ask is, what are ye actually doing? What are you doing in your school, for example?
Ourselves, we created a committee called Planet Power, and we go on litter pickups around the town.
Yes, as well as litter pickups, we went to a school a while ago, and we talked to them about awareness and just trying to spread the message as much as we can. I like to think that we are good at talking about it as well as doing things, because I see a lot of activists who just talk about it and spread awareness, and that is amazing. But I like to think that our committee and everyone in the school who is educated about climate change does both things, talking about it and spreading awareness, and we also like to go on litter pickups with our whole class.
What kind of message do you want to get across to the adults listening to this mission?
I think the main message is just, like, if you have a can or a plastic wrapper in your hand, would you prefer drop it and contribute to all the pollution going into our lovely earth, or would you prefer walk on a couple more steps and put it in a bin? Like, it's honestly just easy.
I think that people should just think about what they're doing and how it could affect the planet and animals and everything, really.
There is a lot of things to be concerned about, but one of the main things is that when our kids and grandkids are around on this earth, we don't want them to look back on history and think like, you know, we did nothing to help this, because their earth will just be ruined and polluted if we don't do something fast.
Do you annoy your parents talking about this at home the whole time?
Sometimes, like trying to buy more eco-friendly stuff. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you very much there. Now, I want to go back to you, Seán, to hear your final sentence or two, your final message, just like Siobhan and Sarah. So, Seán, back to you.
Thank you very much. Sure. All I can do is repeat what those students said, you know, that we actually do things as well as talk about them. And so I would be very grateful. Great gratitude to them for the kind of interest they have taken in this, and not just in talking about it, but in going out and doing things, particularly in the beach thing, cleaning up the beaches in many areas. But again, put pressure on politicians and multinationals that we shouldn't have so much plastic here anyway. So my final thing is our Christian faith. This new understanding of the Christian faith as found in Laudato Si is challenges. This is the way to live into the future, and we give thanks to God for that. And I would like to thank you and all the people who have listened to this, and particularly for the people who are working hard to do things in their own place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seán McDonagh, for joining us tonight. As all of you listening know, this is part of the daily mission schedule. If you have missed anything today, just go back to dioceseofkerry.ie and you'll see reflections and prayers for children, and you can have another look at the booklet and all the bits and pieces. And there's still time to register as well for tomorrow night and to pass the word on to others. I want to say again a huge thank you and a huge honour to have you with us tonight, Seán McDonagh. You're a man with a wealth of ideas and challenges, and you say it the way you see it, and there's plenty of thought behind that and written work. So thanks a million. A big good night from me, from Francis, and from the broader Mission team. Join us again on Mission tomorrow, and join us tomorrow night at 8 o'clock with our final guest, Miriam Hussey, on the theme Embracing Life. Fánaigí Slán.